Welcome to Adult Education and Family Literacy Week and the Command Center, hosted by the Coalition on Adult Basic Education.
What a way to start it off. I'm really excited. I have not had the pleasure of meeting Annie Waldman, but we're going to get to meet right now. And Annie is with ProPublica. I'm going to bring her on. And Annie, how are you? Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, it's our pleasure. So you're with ProPublica, and I was wondering maybe you could just share a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Yeah, so I am an education reporter at ProPublica. ProPublica is a nonpartisan nonprofit newsroom. We've been around since about 2008. I've been at ProPublica for about the past 8 years. I've covered everything in education from K-12 schooling all the way now through adult education. And, one thing that I think really sets this conversation off is, most education reporters really focus on K-12 schools, or they focus on four-year colleges without even, acknowledging the fact that most college students are in community colleges. And then aside from that, most education reporters don't even dip into adult education. And so last year, I spent some time shadowing a third grade class during the pandemic, trying to understand the literacy struggles of teachers and students. And it really made me think, what happens to these students if they get out of school and they struggle to read, or they have other skills they want to brush up on, but the traditional education system doesn't work for them. So this year we have been trying to dig into, what happens to students who grow up, maybe just get off the traditional track and need to catch up with some of their education as adults. So that's really how I got into adult education and why I'm interested in the work that you guys do.
Wow, Annie, that's just awesome. It's the one thing that, if you look at it, just the dollars spent in education, we spend so much money on K-12, and it's so necessary. So don't get me wrong there. Our K-12 and our youth and our young people need to be educated and get smart. But the reality is that while we're spending somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 per student per year, for adult education in our country, oftentimes the people that need it the most, we're spending $500 to $700 per student per year, and we just don't give it enough attention either in the media and also in our budgeting and our thoughts and funding. But I'm so glad you're here. So thank you for joining us. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Yeah, it's Friday, and it's Friday across the country, so I can say that it's a great day to end the week. We've done so much this week of bringing or sharing some of the success stories across the country, and I'm curious in the work that you do. Is there one story that sticks out in your mind in the adult education space of somebody that you saw or something that you observed that said, "Wow, this really is pretty important"?
Yeah, so just a week ago, we published a really big package working with several colleagues, including my colleague Aaliyah Swaby, and we looked at voting rights and literacy issues, which we think is kind of a niche area that not a lot of people really look at, but a lot of adult educators know a lot about. They often have students come in who want to vote, who want to be able to go into the ballot, but they might not understand the process. They might struggle with the ballot language, and what we found is that, there are ways in which literacy itself can be a barrier to voting, either through, how the voting process is set up or through the direct suppression of people who struggle to read. I mean, what we found really is that voting can be a modern day literacy test to some extent, a convoluted obstacle course, and, where every step of the way from registration to the ballot box, it can be incredibly challenging. And so we looked at the story of one woman who has made it her life's mission to help people who have literacy struggles at the ballot box. She's been doing it for 20, 30 years, helping people read their ballots. But, she's in South Georgia in a very small community, and she has been attacked by she has been arrested at the polls for helping people read their ballots. She has been, prosecuted by the local DA for this. And so we were really trying to understand, why is it that it's so hard for people to be able to vote? Why is it that there are some states that are really putting in restrictions to make it harder for people who may have struggles? Shouldn't we want everybody to vote regardless of what their reading abilities might be? And so one other aspect that we looked at was that the design aspect of voting, not just the direct suppression, but how actually ballots are designed to make it more difficult for people who have lower reading levels. And experts have said that redesigning both registration and the election process will lead to more accessible elections where people can vote without assistance and participate more robustly in democracy. They should be written simply and logically laid out. The ballot jargon should be stripped from them. Instructions and ballot amendments should be very, very clear. And also, they should be testing new forms on a diverse group of constituents of people of all reading levels. So one thing that we did as part of our, reporting, where we're really trying to make sure that we're not just reporting on people with literacy struggles, but also providing tools for people who have literacy struggles, was that we created a guide. It's done by my colleague Asia Fields. It's in 10 different languages. And it really, what the guide does is it's written in plain language and it walks readers through every single step of the process. And, we're trying to remind people that even if you don't speak or read English, even if you are learning English, even if you're just learning how to read or brushing up on your reading skills, you have a right to vote. And this guide really tells you how to ask for help, how to vote, and what to do if you have problems. So, we're now in like the next stage of our reporting where we're speaking with tons of adult educators across the country and really trying to find other interesting, diverse stories to tell. But we really want to start this, series of stories up with a voting rights story, especially because the election's coming up. And we think it's an important area that a lot of people don't look at.
Wow, it is so important. So the issue itself, I know I just got my mail-in ballot request recently, and I was a lawyer for 20 years, and I literally, it took me some time to figure out like what I needed to do, and I ripped it up. I actually said, you know what, it's easier for me to go to the polls. But I was just thinking, like if I wasn't able to get out or wasn't able to go to the polls, I would have a really difficult time figuring out even how to get a mail-in ballot in the system. Really remarkable. How do we get this story out farther? Like how do we tell the story of those people? And really, I know ProPublica's got this piece out. Is there someplace people can go for that guide to get the support? Like where would we go to kind of check it out?
Yeah, I mean, it's all on ProPublica's website.
Awesome.
But also, what we're trying to do is we're also trying to gather stories right now. So, we put this out there as a way to say, put our flag down and say we're interested in literacy issues. We're interested in learning and hearing from other people in the field. We want to, hear the stories, the human stories that, most journalists don't take the time to listen to. We want to also learn about, areas of adult education, which, even kind of mainstream don't pay attention to, and we want to hear about the inequities. We in our hearts, in the core of what ProPublica is, we are an accountability organization. We don't like to tread lightly. We like to, show where people are unfairly treated, where people are facing inequities, inequality, and shine a light on it. Shine a light on people who don't necessarily have a voice and give them a platform to speak.
Wow, so there's so many things to unpack in that one statement because there's so many areas that those inequities happen. I do a lot of work in the justice and education space with getting people smarter. The men and women that are incarcerated are coming home. And you talk about inequities in that system where men and women that are often black and brown are so severely impacted by our justice systems. And yet when they come home, they face these challenges of digital literacy where they're tasked with getting a job, and yet they may never have been on a computer possibly in their lifetime. And now they have to get in and they got to navigate a computer and they got to figure out how to download a resume and things that are challenging for us that are knowledgeable, let alone somebody that's never used a system before. So digital technology and that the Digital Equity Act was recently passed, and that's a good thing because it's going to start opening the door, hopefully, to men and women that are in the carceral setting that are trying to get smarter. But it's in all facets. When we talk about literacy, it's everywhere. I was mindful of a story of a young woman who told a story about her father who often went into a restaurant and said, "I'll have what she has," or "I'll have what he has," and it was simply because he couldn't read the menu. And if there was a picture, he would point to it. And the challenges that people have are so basic. We're talking about voting rights where it's a little more complex, and reading a ballot is often confusing for everyone, not let alone somebody that can't necessarily read or write very well. So one of the things I'd ask is, like, if we always have stories. Our learners, and I'm going to be posting videos throughout the day of our learners that have had success stories. And but if somebody had a story they wanted to tell, or an educator that was aware of a story and they wanted to get it out, what's the best way for them to do that, to navigate that?
Well, they can just email me. I mean, I'll put my
Oh,
email out
I
there
love
right
it.
now, which
All
is
right.
just my first name, Annie dot Waldman, my last name at ProPublica.org. I try to get people to email me their stories and talk because, even if we don't include stories in an individual story in a reported piece, it becomes the fabric and the foundation of our reporting to make sure that we're doing this not only in an accurate way, but in an ethical way. Reporters are outsiders for the most part. Oftentimes they're accused of parachuting into areas or situations they don't know well. And, what's really important is making sure we approach things in the most responsible way possible so that we're not taking advantage of anybody, but really elevating the right stories and the right information.
We're going to make it even easier for you out there. So if you're watching this now, all you need to do is, if you send your information to COABE, it's COABE, www.coabe.org, get on our website. There's a contact page there. Just let us know your story. We'll pass it on to Annie. We'll get it to her, make sure she gives it some voice and gets it out there. Annie, we're celebrating Adult Education and Family Literacy Week this week. Really important that we shine the light on stories across the country for people that are doing great. So, in the work that you're doing, why is it that adult education, in particular in regard to how it impacts a family, why is it so important to ProPublica to get these kinds of stories out?
I think it's because, for so long, these stories have been hidden. They have been kind of they're not in the mainstream. A lot of people don't want to talk about adult education. They don't understand adult education. They don't understand the need for it. And, what it was so shocking, I think in the very early stages of my reporting for so many people was just the extent of the population that this could impact. I mean, if you look at the National Center for Education Statistics recent PAC data that was just released, I mean, they've calculated from their surveys that about, 1/5 of the population struggles to read at a basic level. And if you think about that, if you just think about, how that number manifested itself, was it students with disabilities not getting diagnosed in schools properly? Was it the school system itself and the inequities in the school system? Was it at home pressures and poverty and all these other kind of intergenerational things wrapped together? But regardless of what it was, I mean, it means that it should be a national priority. We should be trying to understand how this percentage of the population can be assisted, how they can have not only the education to bring them to a level where they can have a life that is, where they make enough money, they can get a job, they can get transportation, they can get a driver's license, very basic, simple things. But also, how can we break this cycle so it doesn't keep happening? The PIAC data is recent, but the numbers have been the same for many, many decades. So it doesn't seem like, it's been prioritized enough nationally to really, change the trajectory at this point.
Yeah, so you mentioned something regarding the politics of this, and it's interesting. We've gotten proclamations from across the country this week, and we've all met with legislators, both virtually and live on Capitol Hill, over the course of the week, and local legislators from mayors and governors and state legislators. The one thing about education, kind of like workforce development, is that there's on both sides of the aisle. Both sides will agree unanimously that we want to get people smarter in our country. And they will agree education is important. They will also agree that we need to get people into better jobs. and that the labor market's really important. And that's kind of a nonpartisan issue. It's like it just is out there. Both sides agree that this happens. How you get there and how much money gets attributed to work, it's a little sticky sometimes. But I think the general premise of that education's important and workforce development's important and skill development's important are universal across the aisles. I'm curious though, when we talk about the politics of it all, what are you seeing as far as are the political leaders of our country, are they beginning to get it now? Or is there like a door opening where politics is being put aside to really address some of these issues?
That's a really good question. I mean, I haven't yet, I should be perfectly transparent. I haven't yet kind of dug into the political side of it. But recently I did look at the federal appropriations for WIOA, and, how the kind of federal grant system has changed over the years. And if you go to their website and you look at the raw numbers, looks like it's been going up. In 2000, it was
Mhm.
around 500 million. Now I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think it's around 650. And so it appears over time to have kind of risen. But if you adjust that for inflation, of course, not including the last 6 months, because that would throw your numbers off a lot. But if you adjust that for inflation to about 2001, you'll see that the numbers have remained flat. They've remained stagnant. And this is not because the need is going down. I know the number of students have gone down, but the need is going up, especially when you include digital literacy and the cost of learning with computers and technology. I mean, it is not an inexpensive craft, from as what I've heard from adult educators. And a lot of adult educators I've been speaking with have said they have waiting lists for, their training programs, their workforce programs, and a lot of them don't even have elementary literacy courses because it doesn't fit in with the framework of the metrics and the accountability that's required with the federal funding. So, it is a complicated field. It is a complicated thing to dig into. I think people say money talks, and when you look at the money and it looks pretty flat, I mean, it does suggest that, regardless of the politics, there hasn't been a lot of change.
No, there hasn't. We've been talking to educators throughout the week, and the one thing that is really we're ultra super aware of, especially for those that are on the front lines, is that they're not making a fortune. Like the pay for our adult educators often is we have more adult educators that are part time than anything, and we need more full time adult educators that are getting benefits and that are fully vested in doing what they're doing. And the other piece of this is, where they talk about the Great Resignation, and I think I don't really necessarily believe that. I think it's a great pivot. I think our country's pivoting, and we're seeing a lot of people now that are going to need upskilling, where they've left a job and they want to get upskilled to a better position. So math and reading supports are going to see more and more people re-engaging to try to get smarter to get into those jobs that they've always wanted, going back for those credentials and stackable credentials and things that will send them on a true career trajectory and not just a job. And for the longest time, we've had this notion, and we'll just take a job. That's okay. But I think people are realizing, life is more than about a job. It's about finding that what I'm happy, what's going to make me happy and passionate about, and that career is really important. So I just I want to ask you one or two more questions, and we'll let you go and enjoy your Friday. But one thing I would like to ask is, if you had a message that you'd like to share, besides send me your stories, send me your stories, send me your stories. Besides that, if you had one message you want to share with our adult learners across the country in the work you do, what would that message be?
I guess it would just be gratitude. I mean, as a reporter, the one thing, and a journalist, the one thing that we rely on, we can't live without, are the people out there. And I know I said, send me your stories, but the most important thing is I'm actually very just grateful for people trusting other people to share their stories, because it's, without that, I think it's really hard to not only explain the brass tacks of adult education, but also, there are so many moving stories that I've heard in my reporting of people helping other people, people getting people in programs to better themselves, to find what they want to do later on in life, to overcome certain barriers. And it's really, it's moving, it's inspiring. And, these are stories that really happen every day, but they're not always shared, right? A lot of times they're kind of things you kind of hear here and there. So I'm just grateful for adult learners having faith in, reporters like myself or even other folks in the field to just share their stories and to be open about it, because I know that sometimes it can be difficult to open up and share.
Annie, thank you so much. And I want to let our audience know if you wanted more information, what's the ProPublica website they can go to?
It's just propublica.org, PROPUBLICA.org.
Awesome. And it's Annie.Waldman at ProPublica.org. And if you have any stories, you're welcome. Share them out to Coabe, share them out to me, or just directly to Annie if you're comfortable. But a story may be words, but those stories paint pictures that are 10,000 words because they really tell the what's going on in the field of adult education. And we're so grateful that you took some time today to celebrate with us the Adult Education and Family Literacy Week. I look forward to personally working with you, getting to know you more, but definitely sharing the stories with you. And I will be sending you all the clips from this week. And then you can have a field day because there's a lot of amazing stories that we've captured and we want to get them all on your radar screen. So we'll give you plenty of opportunity for that. Thank you, Annie. We appreciate you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff. Have a lovely Friday as well.
Thanks, you too.
All
So
right.
Annie
Bye.
Waldman from ProPublica.